habitats or ecosystems, or humans or livestock. These are all non-native species to the United States. So we have the Colorado Noxious Weed Act. The General Assembly finds and declares that there is a need to ensure that all lands of the state of Colorado, whether in private or public ownership, are protected by and subject to the jurisdiction of a local government empowered to manage undesirable plants as designated by the state of Colorado and the local governing body. So like I mentioned before, the counties have the jurisdiction or legality to enforce the Colorado Noxious Weed Act. Municipalities such as, the town of Mancos or the town of Dolores, they have their own weed management plans, so the county doesn't go on the municipalities of the towns. So they usually have their own thing, but the county in whole has their own noxious weed plan. So obnoxious weeds can be native species, they can be non-native species, just plants that are not desirable for whatever the landowner is trying to accomplish on their property. Our program mainly deals with noxious weeds, however we will help landowners come up with management plans for obnoxious weeds as well, especially native plants that are toxic or poisonous to livestock, people, or plants. We definitely make that a priority.
Do you have examples of obnoxious weeds?
And we will go over obnoxious weeds here. Okay, so why are these noxious weeds so successful in Colorado? Well, it's because they don't have any natural predators in this area. They don't have natural diseases. They have competitive advantages such as the seed dispersal, seed structure to allow for long distance travel. Like your Canada thistle, those seeds can fly in the wind for miles. Seed germination tends to be faster and more successful than our native species. They have root system advantages, the perennial species, and they're also, some of them have allelopathic abilities where they omit a certain chemical into the soil, which either kills off the native species or prevents them from growing as well as the noxious weeds do. That's why the weeds can outcompete our native species. So overall, these noxious weeds are well suited for survival in harsh conditions, and they do very good in Colorado, unfortunately, the United States. So this is one example. So Russian knapweed is from Russia, obviously. And over in Russia, they produce about 100 seeds per plant per year along roadsides. On rangeland, each plant might produce 292 seeds. But over here in the United States, each plant can produce up to 1,200 seeds. So for some reason, in the United States, they just do a lot better, probably because of the natural, they don't have any predators or anything like they do in Russia to keep them under control. Okay, so list A species, there's 3 different lists that the Colorado Department of Agriculture has rated these noxious weeds. List A species are species that aren't very common in Colorado, so we have a chance to eradicate them while the populations are small. There are 16 species on the state list. We don't have a whole lot in Montezuma County. We have probably, I think, we have 3 that are on the state list present. So the county has legality to raise a species of a lower list to a higher list. So if we don't have many B-list species, many populations of a B-list species, and we have a chance to actually eradicate it, we'll put that on the A-list because we want to try to get that eradicated while the population is low. So you can see the 3 species in white are on the state list that we have present in Montezuma County. Mediterranean state, Mediterranean sage, Myrtle Spurge, yellow star thistle, and we'll show pictures of all these. The yellow star thistle, they found at Mesa Verde National Park in the parking lot, but they've got it under control, so we don't have any known populations right now, but just keep an eye out for it. So there's some B-list species that we raised to the A-list within the county because we don't have a whole lot of populations of these, and that's spotted knapweed, diffuse knapweed, hybrid knapweed, yellow toadflax, leafy spurge, cutleaf teasel, and black henbane, and I'll go through these guys you guys recognize this? Rosette? Can we turn the front light off? Is that? Megan's on.
I'll try. I don't see an outlet, but I'll figure it out.
Back. Switches in the back. Okay. So this is our Mediterranean sage. Woo! It's a perennial. There's only a few populations of this within Montezuma County. It's very stinky. You guys can smell it. It's kind of dead. I guess I didn't water it enough.
We're just too good at killing weeds.
If I can walk.
So it doesn't spread.
In our little container in her office. So
Yeah, I try to grow them in my office. That way people come in, they can see the species firsthand, because it's better seeing it than just looking at a picture. So, Mediterranean sage, it's a biennial or short-lived perennial. It has a stout taproot. The first year rosettes, do you guys know what a rosette is? Dawn, what's a rosette? Oh, you're going to have to run up here. Come tell us what a rosette is. Let's make this interactive. I'm going to put you guys on the spot.
The rosette's when it first comes up, and it just forms on the ground, basically leaves on the ground, and the second year it'll bolt, and then wake up. That's when it goes to seed.
Perfect. So I have some, I think if I go behind this, it's good. So thistles, they do the same thing. The first year they have a rosette. This is the rosette. It's very low growing. That's the first year. And I'll pass these around once I get to these species. And then the second year, it's going to bolt and set seed. So that plant kind of resembles common mullein, but it is very different. The leaves are definitely very fuzzy, but it's very pungent. It has very serrated leaves as well, and it's a bluish color. So the second year, the plant will produce more leaves with a flowering stem. It's very stinky. It has a distinct smell. The flower stem can grow 2 to 3 feet tall and branch 2 to 3 feet wide. Flowers are white to yellowish white and appear in clusters. So we don't have a whole lot of this, but just keep an eye out. If you see something that resembles it, just let us know.
Where do you see it in the county?
So we have seen it. It's off of County Road 29. Up. What's the other crossroad, Don?
I thought it was R.
Yeah, R. Up above Cap Hill.
And we've notified all those landowners. Montezuma County actually accesses their properties, and we dig up the rosettes every year. So we're definitely on it. Okay, so this guy, Megan will walk around with it. Do you guys recognize it?
Yes.
Okay, this is Myrtle Spurge. So this is on the state list designated for eradication. Unfortunately, it's not on the New Mexico state list, so it's legal to sell it in New Mexico, and that's why people bring it to Cortez, Colorado, and plant it. So hopefully Colorado and New Mexico will get on the same page sometime, so we're not just battling things constantly.
I'm allergic to it.
How much do you see of that?
Yeah.
I see a lot of it within the city limits. I've seen some of it at the Indian camp. A lot of people are just planting it in their landscapes, and then it starts taking off into pastures, rangeland. So we don't have a whole lot of it, but there is quite a bit within city limits. And we're working with the city to take care of that.
People are bringing it up in New Mexico.
Yep.
It's called donkey's tail.
Yeah, they're selling it as donkey's tail.
How many places sell it? Is it possible to go to those places?
It's in New Mexico. It's legal to sell it. It's not even on their noxious weed list. So as long as nurseries are making money off of it, they're going to sell it. Okay, so it's a perennial with fleshy stems. Leaves are fleshy blue-green and alternate. Flowers are inconspicuous with yellow-green petal-like bracts that appear from March to May. It spreads by seed and is capable of projecting seeds up to 15 feet away. And with any spurge, they do that. It's just a chemical reaction, and it will just shoot that seed off of the mother plant to another area. It grows at taproot. All spurges contain a toxic milky sap, which can cause severe skin irritations, including blistering. And we had some folks come in. I'll have Megan tell them. Go to the microphone, you can tell them about the case that we had.
Yeah. Is it on? Okay. Yeah, we had a couple that just bought a house here in town. It was in their garden, and they knew it was a weed, so they were pulling it. It was within the roses. And actually, her daughter and mother-in-law broke out with huge, nasty hives, and they ended up in the urgent care because of it. So, I mean, they get pretty gross. And it was in their eyes because they, you know, they had it on their hands and rubbed their face, and so it was just anywhere that they touched or their hands touched.
So when you're taking care of spurge, be very careful. Use gloves and don't involve your kids, I suppose, in trying to get rid of it. So here's some pictures. You can see the flowers. They're pretty distinct. If you see it once, you'll definitely recognize it. If you come in my office next spring, I'm sure we'll have some flowering that you can actually see firsthand. This is what it looks like growing in rock beds. These pictures are taken in Montezuma County within the city limits.
What works best to get rid of it?
You know, since it's growing in your garden, hand pulling is best because you don't want to kill your other vegetation. But if it's in like a rangeland situation where it's taking off, there are certain herbicides that will work best, and it is in my noxious weed book with some recommendations. I think 2,4-D and Tellar would take care of it. So a broadleaf selective. You guys recognize this one? I hope not. This is yellow star thistle. So this is the one that they found at Mesa Verde National Park in the parking lot. But in Montana and other states, it just wreaks havoc. It just takes over complete fields, and it's nasty, and it's hard to get rid of, and it's physically damaging, you know, to animals if they eat it because of the thorns. So it's a winter annual that is blue-green in color, has a good taproot, produces bright yellow flowers with sharp, stiff spines surrounding the base of the flower that can extend up to 3/4 of an inch long. Basal leaves are 1 to 3 inches long and deeply lobed, while upper leaves are smaller and narrower. Stems appear winged, and both stem and leaves have a slight whitish nap covering them. So this is a picture in a different state how it can just take over fields. This is a picture of the rosette. It kind of looks like a dandelion rosette, or even spotted knapweed. Okay, so this one, hopefully you guys haven't really seen it. Do you guys recognize it? And unfortunately, I don't have any species here to show you. This is Leafy Spurge. So we don't have a whole lot of this in Montezuma County. That's why we put it on the A-list to eradicate it. If you do have it on your property, Montezuma County Noxious Weed Department will come treat it free of charge. It's on about 6 properties that we know of that we've been treating yearly to try to eradicate it. So it's a deep-rooted perennial that spreads by seed and extensive creeping roots. The roots can extend as deep as 30 feet into the soil and extremely wide spreading. The roots are brown and contain numerous pink buds that generally produce new shoots or roots. The stems are smooth, pale green, and thickly clustered. Leaves are alternate, narrow, linear, and 1 to 4 inches long. Flowers are very small and yellow-greenish, just like most spurge flowers. They are enclosed by very visible yellow-green heart-shaped bracts, and the entire plant contains toxic white milky sap. It's very challenging to manage it, but we have herbicides that actually do a good job these days. We've been using Strut and Tordon. That seems to be good. Tordon's a restricted use herbicide, but Strut alone should take care of it. Strut and method maybe. But if you do have it, call us and we'll come treat it for free. So here's some pictures of it. Okay, this guy. Anybody recognize it besides Dawn? This is diffuse snapweed. So this is on the state list B. However, since we don't have too much of it in Montezuma County, we are trying to eradicate it. So it is on our county list A. It's a biannual forb that reproduces solely by seed. During the first year of growth, diffuse snapweed appears as a rosette. During the second year, the stem bolts, flowers, set seed, and the plant dies. So the key to controlling this is to preventing it from going to seed. Flowers are mostly white, but you can't judge any of these knapweeds. You can't identify them by the flower color because they vary so much. These guys are usually white, but sometimes they can be purple. Russian knapweed is usually purple, but sometimes it can be white. So it's the bracts. The bracts are how you identify these knapweeds. And we'll compare the bracts too. The bracts that enclose the flower head. So the bracts are the underneath part of the flower, under the flower part. Here's a picture. They have very pokey spines, as you can see. Megan will show you around. That's how you identify this diffuse snapweed. Here's a picture of it. Here's a picture of the rosette. Okay, you guys know what this is? This is spotted knapweed. So I'm going to send this board around. It has our 3 different knapweeds, and so you can identify them based on the bracts. So spotted knapweed has spotted bracts, diffuse has pokey spines, Russian knapweed has clear bracts. We can pass that around.
No, we do have some of that in our history.
Yes, we do. And we do have diffuse as well.
But this is another one that's on the state list B, but we put it on our A list because we're trying to eradicate it. Spotted knapweed is mainly growing on the highways, CDOT right-of-way, which we're working on. It's on some properties adjacent to CDOT, but
Diffuse.
So what's the difference between the Russian knapweed
on the bracts,
On the bracts.
they're clear.
Oh, they're clear, okay.
They're clear. They're not spiky and they don't have spots. They're just clear bracts.
They look kind of spiky though, no?
Did you feel it?
I did kind of rub it.
Okay. Yeah, they're not spiky.
They're not, the other ones are definitely.
Yes. And Megan, you can send like all 3 species down the line so they can, not only that, but you can send the, that way they can really look at them. And then I have Russian knapweed on the table. Okay, so spotted knapweed is a short-lived perennial forb that reproduces mainly by seed. Seeds are viable for up to 8 years. How you identify it is they have black tipped spiny bracts at the base of the flower. The flowers are solitary at the tip of each branch. Flowers pink to purple and rarely white, but they can be white. The leaves on the stem are alternate, deeply lobed, and become smaller and simple near the tips of the stem. The basal rosette leaves are deeply lobed. But the best way to identify knapweeds is the bracts.
I'll spend some time in my field now. I'm looking at my weeds.
And we'll talk about Russian knapweed in a bit. That's,
You want me to send it down?
yeah, you can send it down. But the Russian knapweed is still on our B list, obviously, because we have a lot of it, and there's no way we're going to eradicate it anytime soon. But the diffuse and spotted are on our A list to eradicate.
That one, do you remember what was sprayed on my property? Do you remember one?
I think we did milestone.
Mostly.
I think.
Was it for, it was Russian, wasn't it?
Yep, you have Russian. Yeah. Okay, so this next one is yellow toad flax. So this is on our B list. This is on the state B list, but we put it on our A list because we don't have too much of it. We have it on top of Minkus Hill, and then we have it at the Cortez Cemetery. And that's the only places that we know that it is at. It's a perennial species. The leaves are narrow and linear. Stems are woody at the base and smooth towards the top. All the toadflax species have the showy snapdragon flowers, bright yellow. Has an extensive root system, making control options varied. It's known to be mildly poisonous to cattle. So I guess we can, let's send the Dalmatian toadflax down with it. That way they can compare the two. Okay. So these are both our toadflaxes. Dalmatian toadflax, we have like 4,000 acres of it, so it's going to stay on the B list for right now. How you tell the differences is the leaves. So the yellow toadflax has very linear, fine leaves, whereas the Dalmatian toadflax has kind of heart-shaped leaves that curl up and clasp the stem. So you can kind of see the differences as it's passed.
And the Dalmatian's okay?
No, it's on the B list.
Yeah, so explain that again. One, you're aggressively fighting.
Okay, so yellow toadflax is on the state B list, but we put it on the A list because we don't have too many populations of it, and we have a chance to eradicate it. Dalmatian toadflax is pretty widespread right now, so there's no chance that we can actually eradicate it. So right now we're just requiring to control and suppress to prevent it from flowering. And maybe eventually, once we get the populations under control, we can bump it to the A list and try to eradicate it. Did that answer your question? Okay. So here's a picture of yellow toadflax up on Minkus Hill. It really displaces the native species and takes off. It's a species that really likes after fires too, that I've noticed. Up on where the Weber fire was, a lot of toadflax came up after that. Okay, this is Megan's favorite. This is cutleaf teasel. This is a gnarly one. We don't have too much of it in Montezuma County. It's on the state list B, but we put it to A list so we can eradicate it. It likes waterways. So it's over at the Hartman Draw right now. That's where it's spreading. There's another location over by the Votech College on the BLM property. And then we've seen it in a couple places within city limits. So if you touch it, the whole stem is just covered in these gnarly little prickles. It's very distinct. At a distance, it's hard to tell. It kind of resembles common mullein because common mullein grows really tall too. But it is very distinct. There's nothing that looks like it around here.
And they come up and they
It's a biennial, sometimes a perennial. So a biennial means that the first year it'll grow as a rosette, the second year it'll bolt up and set seed and die.
Yeah, this one definitely sticks.
The flowers are almost white, tannish, with spiny on-bracts at the base. Flowering plants have large, oblong, opposite leaves that form cups and are prickly. So this is a picture of the rosette. If you guys are curious of seeing this, drive down County Road 25, head west of 26, and right before you hit 25, you can see it going down that waterway.
Yep. When you cross the bridge.
Yeah, that whole waterway is, so we're really trying to work with those landowners to try to get it eradicated.
And next to it on the floor is
Common mullein. So you can see these leaves, they really cup the stem, and when it rains, it just holds puddles of water. Okay, this guy. I don't have any samples of this, black henbane. Have you guys seen this? Do you know what this is? La Plata County has it all over the place. And we have it on 2 different properties. So this is on the state list B, but we put it on our A list because we have a chance to eradicate it before it gets out of control. So this species is one of the nightshade family, which contains stramonium and belladonna alkaloids, which causes loss of muscular control, dilation of the pupils, heart palpitation, I don't know if I'm pronouncing these right, hallucinations, delirium, in a large doses, coma, and death. So I have some interesting things I'm going to read to you about black henbane that I found very interesting. So henbane has long been used in southern and central Europe. In ancient Greece, it was considered a sacred plant of Apollo. Henbane was mixed with other herbs and used to induce a hallucinogenic or trance-like state of madness to commune with the divine. During the Middle Ages, henbane was known as witch's herb, one of the major ingredients used in an ointment that gave the hallucinogenic sensation of flying. This gave rise to a witch on the broomstick stereotype that lasts to this day. Henbane induced a sense of body suspension in flight, but on the next day the person would remember nothing. They wouldn't remember anything that happened when they were eating this henbane. In Northern Europe, henbane was renowned as a beer additive, used as a flavor enhancer before the adoption of hops beers. One of the side effects of beer brewed with henbane is that it actually makes a person thirstier, so the more he drinks. High doses of henbane can cause delirium, seizures, irregular heartbeat, and painful death. So don't eat it. It's very toxic to animals. I think it came here in hay. It's toxic to cattle, so you really need to be careful of where you're buying your hay. I always recommend buy it where you live because we don't want anyone else's weeds like this black henbane.
Do we have any in Menlo?
We have it on 2 properties, Fozzie Farm and a property next to Fozzie Farm, so we're actively trying to eradicate it. But it is all over La Plata County, so the chance of it spreading more over here is a pretty good chance. So foliage has a foul odor. The leaves are shallowly lobed to coarsely toothed with sticky hairs. The whole plant is very fuzzy. It's very distinctive. Once you see it once, you'll remember it. You'll know what it looks like. Here's the rosette. Here's the flowers. And this is kind of usually what you'll see. It just keeps flowering the seeds and it'll start curling over. It looks pretty gnarly. I mean, don't eat it. Don't smoke it. All right, list bee species designated for control and suppression. What does that mean? Prevent them from going to seed at all costs. You want to start decreasing the population size. So the list bee species that we have in Montezuma County: bowl thistle, Canada thistle, common tansy, Dalmatian toadflax, hoary cress, also known as whitetop, hound's tongue, jointed goatgrass, musk thistle, oxide daisy, perennial pepperweed, plumeless thistle, Russian knapweed, Russian olive, salt cedar, Sunless Chamomile, Scotch thistle, spotted knapweed. Oh, that should be Russian knapweed. Actually, spotted. Okay, so spotted is on the state list B, but we put it to our A list, so ignore that. Sulfur cinquefoil. What do you guys think this is?
Thistle.
Yeah. Megan will pass it around. Well, I don't think you want to touch it.
I was going to show the rosette. No, we don't have.
Oh, this is bowl thistle. So let's see, how many types of thistles do we have in Montezuma County? We have Canada thistle, bowl thistle, Scotch thistle, musk thistle, Russian thistle, plumeless thistle. The only thistle we have that's a perennial is the Canada thistle. So all these guys, and besides Russian thistle's an annual, but the rest of these guys are biannuals, which means the first year there'll be a rosette, the second year they'll bolt, set seed, and die. So the optimal year to manage it would be that first year when it has the rosette.
So is that the common growth that it's going to
It is, it gets very bushy.
So it's biennial form. It has gumdrop-shaped flowers that are pinkish to dark purple. Flower bracts are somewhat tapered and covered with spines. Seeds are capered with a circle of plume-like white hairs. Leaves are alternate. In Colorado, bull thistle are the only species that are prickly hairy on top and are cotton hairy on the underside of the leaves. The rosettes are pretty distinctive once you start looking at all these thistles. I feel like they're more 3D than the rest. They really pop up, and it's hard to explain. I don't have the rosette for you. But they're very different. Once you start looking at them, you'll start realizing the differences. The flower heads, what?
Like almost dome? That's what you mean by 3D?
They really like, okay, let me show you. Okay, this is a Scotch thistle rosette. And you see how these guys kind of pop up? That's what I mean by 3D. But the ones on the bowl they're so distinctive, and I wish I had it, but they pop up in like distinct, how would you explain it? 3D, I can't. It's hard for me to explain. You just gotta see it, and I'll get you guys a rosette for next year, or maybe this year. I'll look around. Okay, so I have a picture of a rosette. So they're very fuzzy, and it's hard to see the 3D-ness of it, but the spikes just stand up in a certain way. That's very distinctive. Here's a picture of the flowers. You know, the flowers, it has like a globe underneath the flower part, but so does Scotch thistle, but they are a little different. This is more round, more oval. Okay, how about this one?
Yeah.
There's a photo of that bull thistle
Can you see it 3D pop up?
on page 35.
Yeah, that is a good picture of it.
Thank you for that. Okay, so bull thistle is a biennial. This guy is a perennial, which makes it more challenging to control because of the aggressive root system. If you till this up, a 1/4 of an inch fragment of a root will grow an entire new plant. But one thing about this plant is the seeds aren't very viable. I mean, they put a lot of seed out, but I think only like 2% of the seeds will actually germinate successfully. So you got that going for you, but it's really the root system that's very challenging to kill. It's native to Eurasia. In Canada, they call it American thistle. So it's not native to Canada, but it's called Canada thistle, and somebody told me that in Canada they call it American thistle, so it's just a big joke. I don't know. Deep-rooted perennial, spreads by rhizomes and seeds. Leaves are oblong, spiny, bright green, and slightly hairy on the undersurface. Flowers occur in small clusters of 1 to F flowers. I don't know what 1 to F is, but has allopathy ability, so it emits a chemical in the soil which will suppress or kill off other species growing next to it. So this is one that creates a monoculture, and a monoculture is where it's pushing all the other species out, where what's left is just a dense thicket of these noxious weeds. And Canada thistle is really easy to identify compared to the biennials. I mean, they have somewhat little rosettes, but usually they're just kind of growing taller. They're not as flat as the first year rosettes. The leaves are more narrow. They have less distinct pricklies. Scientific word right there.
Is that what I'm sewing?
Here's a picture of it. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this plant. When it goes to seed, it's like a snowstorm. And that seed can just fly for a mile. Here's kind of what the rosettes look like. And so usually with the biennial thistles, you'll see one rosette here, one rosette here. But since Canada thistle is a perennial moving through its root system, you'll see a bunch of them clumped together coming up. Does that make sense? So this is a musk thistle rosette.
And it kind of went darker after we pulled it. It's too.
We have a bunch of these, and I'll have Megan pass,
Looks in there too.
well, not pass them around. Okay, so this is a musk thistle, this is a musk thistle rosette. Sometimes the rosettes are tiny, sometimes they are ginormous. It just depends on how much nutrients and water it's getting. So this is one of our most common thistles, obviously. It can grow 1 feet tall to 10 feet tall down the Gomo Canyon.
Ivanka Trump posed with this thistle last week on Twitter.
Trump did?
Oh gosh.
I'm going to have to look at that. I brought in a 10-foot thistle to our BOCC meeting. They're like, that's not 10 feet tall, and then they measured it. It was 10 feet tall. Okay, so musk thistle, it's a biennial forb that reproduces solely by seed. During the first year, the plant grows as a rosette. The second year, the plant will bolt, set seed, and die. Leaves are spiny, waxy, and dark green in color with a light green midrib. I feel like they're kind of shiny. They're shiny in the light. The flowers are purple and large in size. Flowers are surrounded by numerous lance-shaped spine-tipped bracts. So, as for most thistles, once they flower and you're trying to control them, the best thing to do is cut that flower head off and bag it. Because even if you cut it off before it starts going to seed, it's going to go to seed sitting on the ground. It's crazy. Always dispose of it. Burn it, do something. So here's some pictures of musk thistle.
Why do your horses like the heads of them?
I think they're sweet.
They love them.
Yeah, and goats do too, and people are like, use livestock to control them, but guess what? They're just pooping out that seed somewhere else, and they're just fertilizing it, getting some moisture in there, yeah.
They smell like honey.
Yeah, my horses love them, but I got to do it.
This is a picture of it's gone to seed. Okay, so here's another one. This guy you'll see in Mancos a lot, La Plata County, Archuleta County. If you just look at the properties that you're driving down the highway, it's everywhere. This is Scotch thistle. We have a rosette and we have the plant. So they're kind of gray-like in color. They're very fuzzy. The flower heads are shaped a lot like the bowl, but they're less oval. They're kind of like a half oval. They're more flat at the bottom and then oval up top. So they're another biennial. The first year they'll have a rosette. The second year they'll bolt, set seed, and die. Stems have numerous branched and have broad spiny wings. I found one over by the hospital in Cortez. I cut it down. And just as a fun game, we guessed how many seed heads were there, how many flowers, and there was 384. And I wonder how many seeds are in each flower. I mean, that's a lot of seed. So the leaves are large, grayish green, spiny, and covered with dense, fine hair, giving the leaf a woolly appearance.
So, if they're found Mancos, La Plata, Archuleta, is Scotch thistle for moisture environments?
Perhaps. But then some places you'll find it in the dryland situation. I just don't think that it's really made it this way and established itself. Luckily. I think it's just the luck of the draw, honestly. What do you think, Don?
Pretty much, I've seen it in pastures.
I mean, Canada thistle really likes moisture too, but for some reason, Archuleta the Scotch loves Archuleta.
This year, for the first time, we're back to found it roadsides, the Scotch.
And okay, so let me see. Okay, I have a little clipboard of the different flower heads of all of our thistles minus plumeless thistles, so you can kind of compare those. Plumeless thistle honestly kind of looks a lot like bowl crossed with musk. but spinier. Oh, this is still Scotch. There's some Scotch thistles. They get big. Okay, so here's plumeless thistle. I've had reports that it is around here. I just haven't really identified it. It's a winter annual or biannual that is native to Europe and Asia. Rosettes have wavy leaves with yellow spines, along with the white-colored leaf margins. Leaves are alternate, stalkless, hairy underneath, and blend into the stem. So I don't have much experience with this. I think it is here. I've heard that it's here. It looks a lot. It looks a lot like musk, just more pokey. Okay, so we already went over this one. What is this? Toad flax. Is it yellow or Dalmatian?
Yellow.
Dalmatian. See the leaves? They're more broadleaf. They're heart-shaped. Dalmatian toad flax. So this is a perennial forb. It reproduces by both seed and rhizomes in the root system. Seeds remain viable for at least 10 years. They have the yellow snapdragon-like flowers. The leaves are alternate. They cup the stem. They're very distinctive. We're using weevils for these guys from the Palisade insectary. A lot of times where this is growing is in CRP land where they're trying to get some pollinator species. And so it's hard to go in there and treat it with herbicide because it's going to kill all those forbs that they planted. So these weevils do a very good job. They're very host specific. They're good at overwintering around here. They fly very good. So we've seen some very successful treatments with the biological control. And then we do have the Palisade insectary coming out in September. So if you are curious about biological control agents, let me know and we can get you that seminar information. It should be interesting. So here's a close-up of the leaves cupping the stem on the Dalmatian toadflax. Okay, this guy, what is this? White top or hoary cress. It's all dead right now. This is what it looks like. You can pass it around. Just don't get any seeds on you. Yeah. Seeds are very prolific. It's in the mustard family. It's a very aggressive species. It's growing through its root system. It becomes a monoculture. It can grow 15 feet in each direction in one season, so it grows fast. And it pushes out all the natives and other species growing near it. The plant has numerous small white flowers with 4 petals.
Yeah, they're all dead right now, but they have a very short growing season.
You can't miss it. It's a very early bloomer. It blooms in usually May. And all you'll see is just white fields of this stuff. There's not many other species around here that produce white flowers in May, so it's pretty prominent around here.
Is it a recent invader, and how did it spread?
It's not recent. We've had it for a while, but it just keeps gaining ground on us for sure. It's spreading through its seeds and then the rhizomes. So any mustard, the seed viability is so high. It puts out a lot of seed and they're all very viable, so they're just germinating like crazy. Because we had a lot of moisture this winter, and that's why all the seeds were just germinating, so it really got us this year, for sure. But it's definitely moving through its root systems and seeds. It's all over the place. It's not just our county. It's everywhere. And it can cause bloat in livestock, I've heard, so it's not good to have. Okay, so this guy, hound's tongue. We do have hound's tongue. It's dried up. So this is all over La Plata County. Hound's tongue really likes growing in Gamble oak, which makes it very challenging to spray because usually you're going to have to put a backpack on and crawl through oak to treat it. It likes waterways as well. You'll see it down Mingus River. So this is a toxic plant. It contains alkaloids that are toxic and stop the reproduction of liver cells. Animals may survive for 6 months or longer after eating a lethal amount. Short-lived perennial or biennial form. It produces rosettes the first year. We're passing a leaf around. Did you grab a leaf too? Yeah, that's a leaf. It'll have little rosettes and then it will bolt up the next year, set seed. The flowers are reddish purple and drooping slightly from densely clustered canicles. Leaves are alternate. Often the leaves will appear dusty and insect-ridden. So the seeds are really what give away this plant. They're like Velcro and they stick to everything. You'll see them all over animals, dogs, and that's how they spread. That's the rosette. Does this look familiar to you guys? Anybody in Mancus? Because I know this is all over Mancus. Okay, this one's fun. This is jointed goat grass. It's an annual species, winter annual. It causes problems in wheat fields up in Pleasant View because winter wheat is a winter annual as well. So they're germinating at the same time. It's hard to control this jointed goat grass within the wheat fields. And the combines can't separate the wheat seed from the jointed goat grass seeds, so their wheat will be contaminated by this species and they could lose a lot of money, or the crop could even be completely denied by whoever's purchasing it. And it's going to lower your yield of wheat as well. Plants can grow as a single or multiple stems. I mean, the biggest identifier is the jointed, the seed brackets, how they're jointed on the top, as you can see over there. You'll see these along the right-of-ways. They're all over the place. They're on the county roadsides. We're working on it. They're on CDOT roadsides. They're all over different properties. It's a tough one to control. Here's a close-up of it.
Honey, why is it called goat grass? Will goats eat it?
I'm sure they will. Early on, I'm sure they'll eat it. Okay, so this is Oxide Daisy. We have some of this. So this plant likes high elevation areas. You'll see it all over Rico, Telluride. You'll see it north of Dolores. And sometimes you'll see it within Montezuma County in lower elevations where people plant it in their landscape and it kind of takes off. It's problematic because it does outcompete our native vegetation. Animals don't eat it. They haven't really even seen many pollinators on it, so it's not very beneficial to have. It's on our B list, control for control and suppression. It's a short-lived perennial that reproduces by rhizomes and seeds. The basal and lower leaves are spoon-shaped, toothed, and have long leaf stem. So Shasta Daisy is very similar, but the leaves are different. Shasta leaves they're not serrated. They don't have any tooths on them, whereas these guys do have tooths. The upper leaves are narrow-toothed and clasp the stem. Flowers are white ray flowers and mostly solitary. Seeds remain viable for up to 38 years. They're pretty, but they're bad.
How do you distinguish Oxide Daisy from these chamomiles?
Chamomile?
Chamomile.
Completely different leaves, and we have a sample, and I'll go over that, but completely different leaves. Okay, so this guy, you probably are seeing it along the roadsides right now. It's gone to seed, has white flowers. This is perennial pepper weed. It's a perennial forb, reproduces by both seed and rhizomes. Pepperweed alters ecosystems by acting as a salt pump, absorbing salts from deep in the soil and then depositing them on the surface soil. Flowers have 4 spoon-shaped petals and dense rounded clusters on branched tips of erect stems. Leaves of mature plants are alternate and lance or oblong in shape with serrated edges that are slightly wavy.
But they grow.
This is a little picture of, the rosette when it's starting to come up. All right, so this is our county flower. Everybody knows this one, right?
On your waist, it's very white too.
Russian knapweed. So this is our only perennial knapweed. It's very toxic to the horse family. It emits a chemical in the horse's brain, which causes chewing disease, which pretty much paralyzes their mouth muscles so they can't swallow. So if they eat enough of it, you'll see them sometimes with their heads just kind of dunked in the water trough, and sometimes they'll try to kick back the water to swallow it, but it's irreversible damage. You don't want this in your pasture. They're going to avoid it. However, if that's all you have in the pasture, they're going to eat it and they're going to get sick. And some people call me and they're like, oh, I've seen my horses eat that and they're not sick. Well, if they eat enough of it, they're going to get sick and have their mouth muscles paralyzed. So I definitely would not advise watching your horses eat this. It's a deep-rooted perennial that reproduces by seed and rhizomes. The roots are brown to black with scaly appearance, so that is a distinctive characteristic of this Russian knapweed. If you pull all the knapweeds up, this Russian knapweed is the one that has a black root. The stems and leaves are covered with short gray hairs. Flower color can vary. Don't identify it by the flower color. Has smooth, papery, rounded bracts that surround the flowers. It's allelopathic. It omits zinc in the soil, which kills off nearby plants. It's a monoculture. It'll push out all the other species and just create this dense form of Russian knapweed. And it's also very hard to kill. There's only certain times that are recommended to target it for herbicide treatment, and that's at the bud stage in late fall. You need that herbicide to get into the root system, and those are the 2 stages that are known to have the plant taking it into the root system. But it's very hard to kill. Here's some pictures of it. Just walk outside, you'll see it. Here's a horse eating it. Growing through pavement, pretty impressive.
Is someone in the city of Cortez working on knapweed, Russian knapweed in the city?
Honestly, right now they're not really categorizing noxious weeds versus obnoxious weeds. They're more concerned about the height of any vegetation. So we are working with them to have them create a more solid management plan and actually focus more on the noxious invasive species. So right now it's not a very good program, but hopefully in the future they'll start working on the knapweed and Myrtle Spurge and Leafy Spurge. Does that answer your question? They'll send you letters for alfalfa right now, so it's, yeah.
What city office is it?
It's just the city of Cortez.
Code enforcement office.
And the risk is that you see fields of Russian knapweed in the city, they produce seed, and tires pick them up.
Definitely.
And tires go out in the county.
Yeah. Yeah. We're working on it.
You're
Okay.
the good guys.
Yeah. This is Russian olive. How many of you know what Russian olive is? Everybody? Okay. So I don't really need to go into it, but they can reproduce by seed or root suckers. Seeds are readily spread by birds and can remain viable for up to 3 years. Leaves are alternate narrow and have simple blades with smooth edges. The leaf's lower surface is silvery white, while the upper surface is light green in color. It's shade tolerant and it has spines. So we do have a Russian olive salt cedar program. We hired a crew through numerous grants to go to private landowners and try to treat their Russian olives and salt cedars at a low cost. So if you guys are interested in that, talk with us after this and we'll give you more information. It takes over waterways, it consumes a lot of water, it increases mosquito populations. I guess mosquitoes like the thickets. It's known to what's the word? Carp populations, carp fish, like these Russian olive thickets in the streams. Carps are non-native fish that chase off our native fish, so that's another downside of this Russian olive.
And I've still seen it recommended as a landscape plant.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is salt cedar or tamarisk. Deciduous evergreen shrub or small tree. The leaves are small, scale-like and bluish green. Tiny white to pink flowers. Reproduces by seeds and through the roots. Seeds are viable for up to 45 days, so not too bad. And this acts like a salt pump too. It'll absorb salt from deep in the soil and it will deposit it on top of the soil, which will kill off other plants. Okay. Do you guys need a break or just keep going through it?
Bonnie, is the salt cedar native to anywhere in the West, or is it
Not to the United States. Okay, we'll just keep powering through this. This is, well actually, let's take a coffee break. Let's do 5 minutes coffee break. We're over halfway done. Sulfur cinquefoil. We have some of it up north, more towards Dolores. We don't have any physically in this room. It's on the B list still. It's a perennial forb. There are other cinquefoil species out there that are native, so I mean, be careful that you're not treating the native when you think it's the non-native. Do your research.
How do you tell the difference?
Well, I don't have any of the native ones on here. You'll have to compare them. I don't know. Look through the book. Okay, flowers are pale yellow with 5 heart-shaped petals. Leaves are numerous, alternate, and compound with 5 to 7 leaflets having toothed edges. Leaf stalks have conspicuous perpendicular hairs and leaves appear green on the underside. The erect stems are single to several with few or non-slender branches. The plant has a single taproot and may have several shallow spreading branch roots but no rhizomes. So this is a picture of it. The native ones I've seen are more low growing than this one. I don't know if that's a good identifier tip of it, but, and the flowers are different. It's not marijuana. All right, common tansy. So this one is another one that's on the Colorado noxious weed list, B, but in New Mexico it is not on their list, so they are selling it at the nurseries. It's very similar to yellow yarrow. The difference are the flowers. They're more button-like little flowers, whereas the yarrow, they're just consistent flowers. They're not buttons, I guess. It's a perennial plant, also known as golden buttons and garden tansy.
Is that in Montezuma County?
Yes. I've seen it a lot in Mancus along the roadsides. Leaves have a strong odor when crushed, so do yarrow leaves. One plant can produce up to about 50,000 seeds. So the flowers are definitely the identifiers for this tansy. Okay, scentless chamomile. So this is the one that you guys wanted to know how to identify it versus the Oxide Daisy. Well, the leaves are completely different, and I will send around some old chamomile I have. Okay, where's the daisy too? I'm going to send the daisy and then the chamomile so you guys can see the differences.
What's wrong with it?
The chamomile is kind of more like fern type leaves. The Oxide Daisy have entire leaves that are serrated.
What's wrong with the chamomile?
It's on the noxious weed list, so it's non-native and it takes over, pushes out desirable and native plants. So Sunless Chamomile can be annual, biannual, or short-lived perennial. They really like waterways. I've seen it up on County Road N, and it's taking over an irrigation ditch. The seedlings emerge in spring and can produce a dense mat, outcompeting other species. Each flower head can produce 300 seeds, and a single plant can produce 300,000 seeds. Flowers are white and daisy-like that are solitary on each stem.
Bonnie, is the Sunless Chamomile different than the native chamomile or medicinal?
There's a bunch of different chamomiles.
Yeah.
There
It's not,
are.
this is not a medicinal chamomile.
It can be medicinal, but it's non-native and it outcompetes our native species, so it's on the noxious weed list.
How would you tell, again, that from a...
That's chamomile.
We do have that here.
Oh, yes. Just in a couple areas. I've seen it really take over a couple properties up County Road N, and it's taking over an irrigation ditch. That's the only place that I've seen it. I've seen a couple individual plants north of Dolores, but they're not causing problems. I guess we've treated them because they will cause problems, but...
So you just kill them? I live off the road end. I know exactly
Oh.
what you're talking about.
Oh, you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, so I just weed eat them. Do you have to spray them to get rid of them, or they don't seem to...
You know, they are annual, biannuals, so as long as you prevent them from going to seed, you're in good shape.
Get 'em
Some of them are perennials, but if you keep weed whacking them, it will stress out the root system because it's depleting the nutrient supply. So it could be an option to keep doing it. Just prevent it from flowering. And once it does flower, try to cut those flower heads off and dispose of them.
Is there any way to distinguish that chamomile from the native?
Yeah, there's distinct differences, just like, what were we just talking about that you asked, the cinquefoil. There's slight differences in the leaves and the flowers. You just need to get the book and actually look at how many petals each flower has. Differences in the leaves. Okay, so can you guys all pretty much identify the differences between chamomile and Oxide Daisy? Okay. This is the rosette of the chamomile, so you can see the leaves are kind of fern-like. Okay, so seedless species, they're high population species that we don't really have a chance of controlling, so we recommend control and suppression. These are chicory, common burdock, common mullein, johnswort, downy brome, which is also cheatgrass, field bindweed, halogeton, perennial sow thistle, poison hemlock, puncture vine, red stem fillory, kochia, Russian thistle. We'll go through these pretty quick, and then we're going to go through some obnoxious weeds. So chicory, you guys probably all recognize this. It's actually pretty, it has good nutrition value for animals, but most animals don't like eating it because it's like eating a stick. So most of the time it is avoided, but you know, at least it's not toxic or poisonous. There are some areas where it really does displace the native or desirable species and it just takes over. So it can be a bad one, but it's not the worst one because it isn't toxic.
I've just really seen it take off.
It is what it is. Flax is a native and it is very different. We can show you in the book the different pictures. Okay, this one is common burdock. You'll see this. It likes oak too, just like the houndstone.
On chicory, she had a question.
So if you pull those from the root, will they not come back because I have a neighbor up the road that did some hay, and they hired my kids to pull them one by one in their fields. Like,
Really?
they paid them like $2 per plant. It was,
I'll
yeah,
hire your
it was
kids.
funny, yeah.
Well, let me put some.
That was a while ago, yeah.
That's a plan.
But it was pretty interesting. Yeah. It's kind of, they're older now, so it's probably up, but.
Okay, so this is a perennial species, so doing that is not going to solve the problem. A lot of times when you just cut the top off of a perennial plant, it'll stimulate the root system to send more shoots up. So you got to really get the whole root system out to be effective. So
Interesting.
yeah, I doubt that really took care of the problem. Because these do have deep tap roots too, the chicory.
This chicory, is that what they use for, used to make coffee and stuff?
Yeah, they make chicory tea.
Right, because it is.
Yes.
I think it's called the way they were thinking.
Yeah, so a lot of these do have medicinal or, benefits for people's health. However, at an environmental standpoint, the ecosystems, they're bad. They're bad because they take over the native species. They push out desirable plants. So they're on the noxious weed list. Okay, common burdock. She's going to pass that around. They can grow pretty tall.
Sorry to go back. What's the best way to get rid of chicory then?
If it's in a grass hayfield, I would treat it with herbicide.
Okay.
A broadleaf selective. There's different recommendations in that book for
Oh,
you.
there's the recommendations. Okay.
I think 2,4-D would, maybe not. I would probably mix 2,4-D and milestone or escort or something with that to treat it out.
They do have some of that.
I know that. Yeah, my horses.
Because it will lower your yield for hay or whatever you're growing. So I would treat it. Okay, common burdock. These guys will grow huge. They do like to grow in oak and higher elevations. They like water. They get stuck in your horse's hair, your animals.
Wow. Yeah, crazy.
But the root is medicinal, and I think they make things out of it. I think they make another tea out of it. But it does outcompete other species and reduces our native plants.
I was gonna say, yeah.
See?
My dog.
Yeah.
All right, who knows what this is?
Yeah. It's not huge, but I mean,
Oh.
if you got it, you know you.
All right, this is common mullein, AKA Indian toilet paper. It works well. I prefer that over leaves of something else. Birds love it. It's really good, the seeds for birds. However, it will displace native species and will take over places. If you guys go on the Front Range in Colorado, it's all over the place. So if you have one or two of them, that might be okay, but once it starts really taking over your pasture, you're going to want to treat it. Cheatgrass, everybody knows about this. It's a winter annual. It's actually not too hard to manage. You just need to get a perennial species established in that area, and it will outcompete your cheatgrass. But after a fire, it'll generally kill off all the native plants, and the cheatgrass is the first to germinate. And so it can be challenging, especially in places that are hard to reseed. And it changes the ecosystem to where the fire regimes are a lot less. So you might have a fire every 5 years, which are going to still constantly suppress those native species from getting established. Pre-emergent always works good for controlling cheatgrass. We have plateau. Esplanade works very well. Okay, bindweed. I don't think I brought any, but I think you guys know what it is. There's some mites from the Palisade insectary that do a good job on controlling bindweed. Other than that, Tordon works great, but it's a restricted use herbicide. You can kill it with a high rate of Roundup.
What do you do if you have where your whole property is just blanketed in it?
You're going to want to treat it. So I would treat it, personally, if it was my property, I would treat it with Tordon, and then the next year I would reseed.
But I mean, there's other good stuff in there, so you don't want to just carpet bomb the entire area. But it's everywhere.
Use it broadly selective, I guess, you know, and try to get something else established.
Can you use the biological?
Yeah, you can use the mites.
Big of a area?
And they like big areas. The palisading secretary likes giving them out to properties with a large area.
Does it depend on whether that field is being used for livestock? In other words,
If it's sprayed.
For the palisading secretary, the mites?
what I'm getting at is, I've got neighbors and they've got horses. And so I think they treat the bindweed, but then the horses disturb the soil and the bindweed comes back. Maybe they just need a bigger pasture.
Yeah, I mean, overgrazing is a definite leading cause to a lot of these noxious weeds. If you treat it, you always really need to take the time to reseed, especially when there's nothing else growing. You need to kick your horses off for at least a year to get something else established. And then having better grazing practices, rotating, and does that answer?
Yeah, I think the situation I'm seeing is just way too small of a field, and it's not from grazing, it's just from the action of the hooves, the horses being active during the day and disturbing the soil with the hooves.
That can happen too.
Well, my horses eat, I mean, they love the bindweed, but I'm not happy about them having too much of it. It's not, it can be toxic.
Yeah, I mean, without the bindweed, if you had a grass species, you're going to get more foliage AMUs to withstand or sustain your horses a lot longer than just some bindweed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're going to get a higher yield with grass rather than them just relying on a low-growing forb for their diet.
Bonnie? You said that to get those mites, they give them to people, or what's the program? Or I'm curious.
Yeah, you should come to the Paladin Secretary seminar that we're going to have in September, but usually they charge a low amount for their biological agents, and we do have a cost share that will reimburse you 50%, but it's usually not that much. It's very inexpensive. But it really depends on how many mites they have compared to how many people are wanting them. So you could be put on a list until they have enough available for your property.
What about the timing?
You're going to have to ask them about the timing. I have never used the mites on bindweed. I'm assuming you're going to want to do it when there's enough foliage to get the mites established, like right now when they're all flowering. I think that would be a good time, but I'm not an expert on the mites.
And I'm sort of asking for, I have some obviously myself, but a friend of mine is growing hemp, and they're having the dickens with bindweed, just choking everything out, and I mean, obviously it's organic, so they don't want to be spraying, and mites sound
Yeah,
like
that might be a good option
great
for them
option.
because they are very host specific. They're not going to start eating their hemp.
Right.
They're just going to be for the bindweed.
Yeah, they should be here today,
So-
but I'll have to pass that information on to them.
Yeah, that might be interesting.
Do those mites affect anything else out there?
It's all
No.
very host specific. The only thing that the state allows for biological control is when it's that host specific where it won't get anything else except for that one species. And I don't know how they do that, but they do. Okay, poison hemlock. So back in the day, the Athenian law to put people to death, to execute them, was to put poison hemlock in a tea. And that's how they killed Socrates. They gave him some poison hemlock tea. So this stuff loves waterways. It looks a lot like wild carrot, but wild carrot has hairs on it. It's very fuzzy, whereas poison hemlock has no hairs on the stem. The flowers are very similar, the leaves are very similar to the carrot, but it's all about the pubescentness on the stems. Poison hemlock has the red dots, which is very distinctive, but sometimes the wild carrots can have some red dots too, so don't judge it on that. They like waterways. They do grow all over the place around here. Teach your kids about it, because a long time ago down McElmo Creek, I guess some kids thought poison hemlock was a wild carrot and they ate it and got really sick. It does not take much consumption of poison hemlock to kill you. How about this?
Oh, yeah.
Puncture vine, and I got some of it. So this is on the C list. So this is an annual, so if you have bare ground, you know, you might get this because it has no competition from a perennial species. It's down McElmo all over the place. Do you guys have any questions about puncture vine? It's also called goat heads. Yeah. Okay, this is red stem fillery. It's a winter annual, so you'll see it flowering pretty early in the spring, summer. It has purple flowers, and it kind of has, how would you call that, hooks? It's not really a hook. Barb, little barbs, low growing. It's all over the place. Russian thistle is your tumbleweed. So it's an annual.
Yes.
This is a little one that hasn't really formed yet.
Yeah.
You want to treat these guys early in the year before they become a tumbleweed, obviously. They're going to break off at the surface, roll around, spread the seeds everywhere. Kochia, that's another big one. So these aren't on the state list, but we put them on our county list because we don't want these species all over the gravel pits and spreading the seeds everywhere. I guess I don't have kochia. But are you guys familiar with kochia? It grows all over the place.
And I saw that by the gravel pit out at Vegas, there's just a whole wall of it.
Yeah, and I need to go deal with that soon.
And why does it grow at the gravel pit? Is there?
Why does it grow where?
Yeah, why does it grow? Is it like gravel, or is there something specific?
Yeah, it's an annual that just takes over everywhere. It's an obnoxious, non-native species.
Or the seeds are able to establish in disturbed ground.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they like disturbed areas for sure.
What is that?
It is good forage, but it can accumulate nitrates.
It's a tumble mustard. We'll go with that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go over some obnoxious weeds. This is Western World Milkweed. It's very toxic. You do not want to get this in your hay because it will kill your horse, it will kill your cows. All milkweeds are toxic. Showy milkweed's toxic, Western World milkweed's toxic. The problem with Western World is when it's first growing, it does resemble grass. So it's hard to identify outside your grass. You know, horses are eating the grass and they accidentally eat the Western World milkweed and they get really sick. So you definitely want to manage it if you have livestock or if you are putting up hay. It has a milky sap inside, all milkweeds do. That is also toxic. But the whole plants are toxic. The monarch butterflies love the showy milkweed. Most animals avoid that anyway. It's not as big of a problem as the Western World milkweed.
The cows just get to eat and then they don't pay attention.
Okay, foxtail barley. So this is a native, but it's obnoxious.
Showy and Western World.
Oh, yeah.
Big difference.
We missed that one critical
But
word.
this is so scary
It's a
because
native,
cows get
but
to eat.
Obnoxious.
Pay attention.
It's an obnoxious native species.
Yeah.
And it's challenging to control because controlling a grass in another grass is very difficult, but there is a product out called Lambient, and supposedly Lambient will control foxtail barley within perennial grass species and not hurt your grass species. So,
In the area by any chance, people selling them as decorative grass?
foxtail?
Yeah.
Probably. And there are other grasses that look like foxtail, but they're not exactly foxtail.
And why is foxtail obnoxious or objectionable?
Because the barbs can be very hazardous to livestock. It's the same with cheatgrass. They can enter the skin, travel through the body, cause some problems, get in animals' ears, cause abscesses. So it's more of a physical problem than it's not toxic or anything, but it's just hard for people with livestock or pets to have that species present.
My goats won't even eat that.
Really?
Yeah, so I mean,
And animals can graze it early on, but once they develop those seed heads, I mean, I've had to doctor so many calves by cutting open their abscesses, and there's foxtail seeds inside them, so it's not good.
Bonnie, is this what is also called the Rosette?
Nope, different. Different. Okay,
What did you say was specific to that as far as pesticide?
lambient.
Lambient?
Yeah, Lambient. And also you can spot spray it with some glyphosate, but glyphosate will kill your other grasses. But sometimes you just need to take a loss and try to kill it, that way you can get something else planted. We get a lot of calls about foxtail barley, but since it's a native, we really can't do anything about it. Okay, common mallow. You guys probably have seen this around your house. It's an obnoxious weed. It's an annual. Sometimes it can be a short-lived perennial. It has a really good taproot, so pulling it is challenging. There are herbicides you can spray, but honestly, with any annual species you're trying to get rid of, you need to get a perennial species established to kick out that annual. Black medic, you'll see this in your turf a lot. That's what this is, tiny little clover-like leaves with yellow flowers. It's just kind of an obnoxious one, but honestly, 2,4-D or any broadleaf selective will take care of this. Red Stems Pigweed is this guy. You guys recognize this? It's an annual, so once it gets to this stage, it's kind of pointless to spray it, but you can chop it off and burn it or dispose of it to try to prevent any more seeds. But, you know, it's an annual, so as long as you get a perennial established, it should choke out those annual problems.
Disturb soils.
And a lot of these annual weeds, like kochia, like pigweed, are palatable to livestock to a point. When you get a drought year, it'll start accumulating a lot of nitrates, which the animal body can't fully convert to the ammonia and proteins, so it can be toxic in late season in your drought years. So, you know, like the pigweed, just be careful if your animals are eating it. It could have toxic amounts of nitrates. Curly dock is this guy. A lot of it's really brown-red right now. It's another annual obnoxious weed. Any broadleaf selective should take care of it. Milestone, 2,4-D. Yellow alyssum, this was all over the place this year. It's another annual. There's not much to say. Try to replant, get a perennial grass established, and it should start choking this stuff out.
So when's the best time to spray that?
Early spring.
Spring? What does
When
it
it's
look
still
like?
green.
Yeah.
What does it look like in early growth?
I can get you pictures. I'm not
Low growing.
Yeah.
About this tall.
I'm sure it's hard to really identify it within your grass, but
Yes.
And same thing.
That's the stuff that has.
Early spring.
Mhm.
Yep, early spring is the best time to get most of these.
tumble mustard, this stuff is everywhere, but it's all dead right now. It has a very short growing season, and once it dies, you're left with all these fine fuels, which could be a fire hazard. So it's another annual, meaning that that pasture was probably disturbed and your perennials got diminished, so these annuals took over.
That's the tumble mustard?
Yep. Flickweed is another mustard. I don't have any of it here. It has more of like fern type flowers, leaves. Yellow flowers, annual mustard. Blue mustards, you'll see those in the springtime. They have purple flowers. It's just another annual mustard.
Is that the one that the seed heads form and then they trip you? They're real hard.
They will have little seed pods,
Yeah,
but they're pretty small plants.
yeah.
But could be.
So that's an obnoxious weed, right?
Obnoxious. These are all obnoxious. Burr buttercup is pretty low growing. I don't have any of it with me, but this is what it looks like. Just an annual.
So which is the, is that the mustard seed, the mustard plant that has the yellow seed, the yellow flower?
A lot of mustards have yellow flowers. There's a lot of mustards.
When's the best time to spray?
Spring. Any annuals, you need to get them early.
They're dead now, so.
Yeah, get them early, like May.
Right.
And use a broadleaf selective, that way it won't hurt your grass, and you're trying to promote your grass.
Killed some of that already, but a lot of spraying if I have to try to get them.
So this stuff right now is all over the place. Curly cup gumweed, it's very sticky.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what this is. It's an annual. I have it in my pasture and I just pulled it and disposed of it. Pretty easy to control with the broadleaf selective, but honestly you need to get a perennial established in those areas. That's why you're getting all these annuals. Nip it in the bud.
Curly cap, what was it?
Curly cup gumweed. And so I don't really have many obnoxious weeds in the Montezuma County Weed Guide, but there are, there's a really good book that I have, Weeds of the West. It's no longer in print, so it's kind of expensive, but it's a really good book to have. It has a bunch of the different mustards in it. It doesn't give you management, but if you have an annual weed that you're trying to manage, just know that you need to get a perennial something established to try to outcompete those annuals. You can always spray the annuals in the spring to prevent them from going to seed and try to promote your grasses to get those nutrients that those annuals are taking up. Perennial species, controlling them is challenging because you have to, if you're doing it mechanically, you need to get rid of that whole root system in order to be successful. If you mow it, you can keep mowing and eventually it'll deplete the nutrient supply in the root system. But herbicides are probably the way to go for most of these perennial species you're trying to control. Any questions? You got to walk up to the microphone if you have a question now. So are you guys pretty much clear on the thistles, the differences in thistles?
Clear as mud.
Okay, let's see. Let's see about that.
I said clear as mud.
Okay.
Musk.
Musk?
Well,
This is what.
Yeah, okay.
which one was that one? What was it?
Bull thistle.
That's the weird.
Scotch.
Scotch.
It's great. There you go.
American thistle.
Yes. Good job.
I've never heard that being called American thistle.
Do you have a good county flower?
Snap. Russian nap.
Yes. Look at these guys.
Myrtle Spurge.
Oh, I didn't show you guys this one. Oh, I have more obnoxious weeds. Okay, so this is buffalo burr. This is a native species. I'm going to pass this around. You guys touch this.
What's it called again?
Buffalo burr. It'll have yellow flowers.
25 and G had it everywhere. We got like 8 phone calls about it.
Okay, here's another one that I didn't talk about. It's obnoxious. So this is in the nightshade family. There's a bunch of different nightshades. I don't know exactly which one this is. It's very low growing. These little grape-like things are always nightshades. So when you see these guys, that's nightshade, meaning this is very toxic. Do not eat it. Don't let your animals eat it. You can pass that around. Yes.
And I'm sorry, what was the name? What was this?
That's in the nightshade family. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. I haven't looked. But you can pass. I'll have to look. It doesn't look like. These look like berries.
They look like a non-edible berry.
Yeah, I'll have to look them up.
Do we have the buffalo bird here?
Do we have what?
Buffalo bird?
Yes.
I said this was a vine.
Yeah. Okay, another obnoxious weed that I grabbed.
She was just talking about the.
You guys seeing this everywhere?
Yes.
Prickly lettuce. This is an annual. It's edible, but animals don't like to eat it because it's so woody.
It's all along the CDOT right away, so on like 491. Right along there.
Hey, I'm gonna pick on somebody.
You got it covered up.
I'm covering. Oh. You can ask a friend. Yellow-toed flax.
The nightshade, did you know which one that was? No?
It's just in the family. Any nightshade.
Oh, somebody else name.
Dalmatian toad flax.
Oh, something
Because it has big broad, right?
Yeah, the cut.
Bonnie, did you go over, Western
Oh, that's how I
Spurge?
explain it. I'm like, is it like this? Because they're just very cut.
Did you go over
Kinda
Western
waxy.
Spurge?
Versus.
Western spurge.
Versus the yellow.
We went over Leafy Spurge and Myrtle
And
Spurge.
narrow.
Yeah, no, I'm a low growth. It looks like that one doesn't have a little
Those
thing.
kind of
Just spread.
There's a prostrate spurge.
Yeah.
Yes,
There's a
this
tooth
is on the eight.
spurge.
And the Dalmatian is
just
on the
slow
B list
spreading.
because we have so much of it.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
lot.
whatever.
Western world milkweed. Toxic.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Okay, you guys have any questions for me? We didn't go much over management just because we're trying to go through identifying all these guys.
Do we have much halogen here?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
What is this? We went over this one.
Oh,
Does it start with C?
Ask a friend? Yes.
Okay.
Common mallow.
common mallow, there you go.
Oh, yeah, it starts with
Remember the plants.
Common mallow, western mallow.
Kosha.
Kosha.
Is what?
Common mallow, is that western mallow?
No.
And
That's what
it's
we're
possible
digging up.
whole kosher figure.
Yeah, it is. Look at the leaves. They're like arrow shaped.
What kills me is that stem, because the ones up front are just the vines.
Yeah.
These are out back and they're stems that we cut down.
This is bindweed.
And they start-
So bindweed has the arrowhead leaves.
Now, what's the difference between the field bindweed and the little bindweed that you have like in your garden?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Same thing.
I hate that stuff. That's the stuff that reminds. Yeah, all that stuff is, yeah.
Yeah, the roots extend to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, they, it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
survival for 40 years. Oh my God, where did it go?
So you can't.
Any other questions?
I have a question, I have two questions. Do we have halogen in here very much?
Yes.
We do have it. Where is it found around here?
Fairgrounds.
Oh.
It's in dry areas.
Yeah.
Pass
And
that around.
then
That's halogeton. It's on the C list.
the other thing is, you know, if you have a neighbor who's just not mitigating their weeds at all, that you share a big long border with, what are your options?
Call us.
You're anonymous. We don't
Yeah.
say, hey, your neighbor called us.
Okay, yeah, because I've got, like, in a bunch of good neighbors, we have one person who just is.
Yes, give us a call.
Okay. I'm gonna work real hard to get rid of stuff.
And that was for this one?
Red clover?
What kind of
Personal preference.
Oh, I think you've got
Just
lots of
any
stuff.
kind.
I mean, mostly the cheatgrass and
If you-
spurge over there.
Like if I just have a lot of them.
Yeah,
All the
we
different
share a
weeds.
long border.
Like spray in the spring and then you see your seed.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, it
Do you
was one
reseed
of
immediately
the
after?
property that was subdivided.
Yeah.
Depends what
Try to
kind of
get a-
weeds you have and what you're using.
You try your best and they don't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's just annuals, you can reseed. I mean, most of the annuals are gone to seed and dead right now. You might just reseed this fall. And then it also depends if you have water, if you don't have water. If you're
Yeah.
dry land, you usually want to try to reseed, do a dormant seeding around like Thanksgiving. If you have water, you can do it pretty much any time of the year.
And then you just recommend, is it Western seed that just has like a native?
Go to Southwest Seed
Or
Company.
Southwest.
Yeah, and they'll recommend, depending on what your goals are with that property, and if you have water, if you don't have water. Yeah.
Yeah,
Something other than
we
use.
do it too early.
And Roundup doesn't have any residue. It's not going to stay in your soil. So you can hit everything with Roundup. It'll die. A week later, you can reseed. Just depends though, because if you have some perennials, Roundup's not going to kill your perennials. And you need to control the perennial weeds before you can reseed.
So when is the best time, like, we had an area that was full of some kind of, when we planted that seed.
Long grass, long grass.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're gonna spread grass seed, when's the time to do it?
To reseed.
Oh, broadcast? Do you guys have irrigation or no?
No.
So then late fall.
Like,
Before it freezes, but getting to that threshold.
and I just waited all that time.
Yeah.
And then if you have horses or something, put them out there. That way they can try to push that seed into the soil. High Desert Conservation District has a no-till seed drill. Drilling the seed is going to be a lot more efficient than broadcasting.
What does that mean, drilling?
So
Seed drill.
a no-till seed drill is you don't have to pre-till the land. You don't have to work the ground. It doesn't have to be soft. It'll push the seed an inch or have whatever depth that seed needs to germinate. It'll push it into the soil.
And how do you do that? Is that
There's a picture on page 126.
Yeah, it's a no-till seed drill. So you have to have a tractor and it will pull this seed drill and then it will push it in the soil. If you're broadcasting, it has to get into the soil in order to successfully germinate.
Well, if you don't have a tractor, then you're out of luck.
You're gonna have to rent one or talk to a neighbor. Yeah, because I mean, if you're broadcasting, you're wasting a lot of money because there's gonna be birds eating your seed. If you don't have a lot of soil exposed, you know, the seeds can be caught up on whatever foliage is sitting there, so it never gets to the soil to actually germinate.
Well, I
So
can
it's-
come to just till it with a road tiller, a little section there and throw it in there.
Yeah, that worked. And sometimes people will broadcast it and then they'll take a rake and they'll try to get it in there.
Right, I've done that too.
Okay.
So if you did that like in the spring and nothing came up, does that mean the seed is dead or will it come
No,
back up?
usually seed's gonna be viable for 5 years, so it could still be there.
Good. So you might,
Yeah.
Common mullein seed is viable for 100 years.
good.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing.
That's insane.
I don't think I'll be around. To get rid of
Common mullein will be.
it. Yeah.
Were you saying Roundup doesn't kill perennials?
Some it won't. I mean, you really need something that's gonna be systemic to go into the plant, to be absorbed into the root system. Glyphosate is pretty much just a contact, so whatever it touches, it'll kill it. So get on the leaves, it'll just kill the leaves. It won't
Roundup
get
so
absorbed
bad?
into the root system.
Is Roundup bad though, isn't it? I I've heard it's not good.
No, it does not cause cancer.
Okay.
We had a seminar with some chemical reps who explained it very well, and I can't explain it as
We
well
need
as
those
he
charts,
does.
though.
Don, you want to explain it?
Yeah, right.
They did a study where
Yeah.
they studied because Hodgkin's lymphoma is what
Yeah.
a lot of people are saying that it's causing. They did a study on the growth and how many more cases a year Hodgkin's lymphoma was, and the use of Roundup. And the study they did, the company personally didn't do it. It was a health department.
All around
company.
the world.
Right, and they actually found no link to it. And you see it all the time now that, come get your Roundup settlement or whatever. And a lot of that is fraud. But on the study, it shows that the actual Hodgkin's lymphoma has leveled out as the Roundup use has gone up. So there's really not a link to that.
Find a
Right?
correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even want to try to explain it because I just butcher it, but
Yeah.
But that was well done, because you did that before, and we were at that seminar as
Yeah,
well.
you guys were, and you saw the two lines,
Yeah,
and it had the Roundup
exactly.
that kind of went like this,
Yeah.
and Hodgkin's lymphoma kind of started going up and has leveled out, where Roundup is still continuing use, and
And
if
I
there
don't-
was a correlation, they would both be moving up.
I don't exactly remember because there was 4 different areas within the World Association who was studying it that said it caused cancer, but they didn't take into account how much product it was. Can you
that's-
explain it better?
I don't think so, but I think it all depends on how much you were using. If you're using it according to
Right.
direction, I think it was fine, but if you did it, if a little helped, a
If you
lot
drank
would
a
be better.
barrel of it, you're gonna
Yeah.
get sick.
Yeah.
I wish I recorded him talking about it because he
Yeah,
did a
I
great
would love
job.
those charts and stuff,
They
you
did.
did a really good job with it.
Well, they did, over like 30 years, they've done numerous, like hundreds of studies, and never been able to prove that glyphosate caused cancer.
And like he said, always use it to the label. So
And didn't
that's
he
the
say
biggest thing.
that you would have, that he would send you the?
Yeah,
Yes.
he did, and I
Yeah.
can make that available.
We got a bug for it, but,
Yeah.
I have it.
oh, you do?
I do.
So we could look at it or
Yeah.
check it out or
Yeah.
whatever.
I just wish I recorded him
Yeah.
giving that speech.
Yeah.
The biological control seminar in September, would that information be on your website?
When's
or-
the date?
Let me find my phone. Here it is.
The policy.
So did you guys learn anything from?
Yes.
I just kind of try to go over identifying, not much management, because the management talk is, it's long. So it's on September 18th. I'm assuming it's going to be 9 to 12 at First National Bank in Cortez.
9 to 12, on what day?
The 18th.
18th
Of September?
Yes.
September.
At
Wednesday.
First National.
First National,
Yeah, we'll be back over there.
2257.
And like what you were talking about, the management of it, according to the gentlemen that were over at the other place, they said you'd have to do it sometimes 3 and 4, up to 5 years of spraying in order to totally get rid of it.
Just because of the seed viability, the seed bank and all that.
That's it.
So I'm just curious, in the future for these seminars, would you guys want me to just talk about 10 species and cover management too? Or do you want a whole ID and then another one for management? Because if we talked about ID and management, it would take all day.
I think separate classes would be good.
Do you think a thistle day or a knapweed day or maybe just a bee list? I don't know. Just
I think
curious.
the key is to learn to identify them first.
I do too.
And maybe once you learn to identify them, then you can learn how to manage them.
Because a lot of us have a various amount of different types of weeds. And it's I don't know what it is, you know.
Yeah, and part of the identification, I can sit here and tell you you know, the edge of the leaf, where they're located, but I feel like you just seeing it in person
Yeah.
will teach you how to identify it rather than fine-tuning, looking at all those biological
Yes.
terms.
And the little booklet that you have too.
This is really good.
Yes, yeah.
It's
Seeing
nice
it
to
and
see,
looking at it.
what I got out of it is on my property, and knowing that Tumble Mustard or whatever, knowing that's what it is.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Yeah, and we used to do like field days where we'd get like a school bus and drive around, but we'd only cover maybe 10 species and it would take several hours. Whereas if Megan and I just harvest it all, bring it here so you can just see it all. I'm just trying to get an idea of what I should do in the future, so.
Almost anything, I mean, we learned some just to see how big is the plant. Some are big, the photographs, it's hard to judge
Yeah,
size.
yeah.
To hear the discussion, to hear that, okay, I looked in the book, I see Oxide Daisy, I fought that before, but then there were these chamomile things, I couldn't even pronounce it. Now I know how to pronounce it.
Good, good. If you guys have any suggestions, let me know.
Very
Good.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as management, it's pretty simple. I mean, if you have annuals, you just need to get something established to help kick those out.
There's the identification, there's the control, then there's varying degrees of attitude. The city, why isn't the city more aggressive about treating tamarisk and Russian olive?
I don't know. And you know the Carpenter natural area, which is pretty much invasive species, I've been trying to get at them about that. They have salt cedars, they have Russian olives, Knapweed, Thistles, and I've been just on their case about that. And I'm like, look, we have a crew, just let us go chop those suckers down and treat them. They're like, no, we just want to do it in-house.
Daylight Park is one of
Then they never did.
gems, it's the city of Port
I know.
Tamarisk, they got cameras.
Yeah, it's horrible, and we're trying to work with them and motivate them to do something, but I don't know.
And then if residents in the city see that the city is actively going after these
Exactly, yeah.
species, there's a reason for that, and they become more attuned to invasive species throughout the county.
Yeah.
So there's not actually a law that you need to control the A-list or even the Russian olive?
It is the Colorado Noxious Weed Act, but they don't have much teeth right now. They don't do much enforcement outside of the counties who do actually enforce it. I don't know, how would you explain that? I mean,
We don't have teeth.
I don't think they have the budget. I don't think the state has the budget to actually put teeth behind the Colorado Noxious Weed Act.
Well, we were concerned about the Russian olives that are just taking over. Because we keep getting information in the mail and, you know, we have our property, but it's everywhere. And we're like, well, we want to know, are we going to get in trouble if we don't start managing this? Or
No, the Russian olive thing is, you know, since NRCS was giving these plants away, it's hard for the government now to say, hey, get rid of these plants on your property. So it's a voluntary program. I mean, if you understand how damaging they are to your ecosystems, I would hope that you would manage them. I don't see there being enforcement anytime soon on Russian olives because of the extent of the problem we have right now.
well, it's huge.
But I just think it takes the individuals, the private landowners to step up and be like, hey, we're going to take care of our land, we're going to promote healthy landscapes, being a steward of land, and starting at that point. And if enough people step up and take care of their properties, then it will be a chain reaction to, hey, oh my gosh, their property looks good, I better start doing that to my
Well,
property.
see, that's where I cut down a couple of Russian olives a couple weeks ago. But the thing is the McElmo Canal runs right through our property. I'm surrounded by it. I'm like on an island. It's everywhere. So I manage it here, but my neighbor over here is not managing it. So it's kind of,
that makes a difference.
Yeah, I hear you.
you know,
But at least once you get those big trees managed on your property, it's going to be a lot easier managing those sprouts coming up.
okay.
And your property looks a lot better than your neighbors, and maybe they'll see that.
So,
Well, and as far as noxious weeds, we definitely have the authority to enforce management on adjoining properties. So it's just Russian olive, we aren't going to do anything right now. Yeah.
If many moons ago, I had nothing about anything, ended up buying Russian olive trees. I've got 2 in a rental property, but I don't see them sprouting anywhere. Is that a...
You know, if people are landscaping with them and they're not causing problems, then that's fine. I mean, I know the seeds spread, but they're only viable for so long. I see the big problem is being along the waterways and the riparian areas where they're displacing native species. If you have a nice mature tree that's giving you shade in front of your house, I think that's acceptable. It's where it's taking over the ecosystem.
Definitely separate out branches all over the...
Oh, we cut those down.
Yeah. As long as you're managing it appropriately, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I love that smell.
Oh, I can't stand the smell.
Tell them how much water your guys saved this year.
I love that.
Yeah, and I wish I had...
One tree by my house.
I don't have those. So,
but I love this.
for Russian olives, they're going to take up, you know, when they're in riparian areas or along waterways, they are taking 20 gallons a week per inch in diameter. So if they're 5 inches in diameter, you know, they're taking 100 gallons a week. And there's 39 weeks in their growing season. So that's a lot of water each tree is taking. And I have the statistics. If you follow us on Facebook, I calculate the water savings compared to how many trees that we have treated in Montezuma County, and it's crazy. It's in the millions.
The same thing happens like with willows. If you have a willow tree or cottonwoods growing around a pond, they take up a lot of water too, right?
Yeah, and in our area, you know, we don't have that much water. We're always in a drought. So anything we can do to conserve water is a good thing.
I think maybe the contrast is Russian olive is non-native, but willows and cottonwoods in general are native.
And they don't, well, willows do, but cottonwoods aren't going to grow in thickets and take over like Russian olives do.
But how come they sucker up all over the field?
They're root systems.
Yeah. But you can't spray those, right?
Yeah, you can.
You can't, and it won't kill the main tree?
It probably will.
I want the shade, but I don't want the suckers.
I have a bunch of cattails in my pond. Are those a weed or?
They're native.
They're native?
It's personal choice. Some people don't like them, some people do. Depends what you're using that property for. If you want more grazing for your horses and you want to cut back on the cattails, that's
They're just
acceptable.
in the pond. Like, they're in my pond. My horse will go in there and eat them.
Oh, really?
There is, you can use, isn't it a rodeo?
Rodeo. It's
And
an
it
aquatic
also has
label.
the aquatic label on it.
Okay.
And you can spray it within your pond.
I
But you
tried
have
to
make sure
burn
it's
them.
an
We
aquatic
burned them
label.
one year because when they dried
I heard
up.
that.
It's not going to kill them.
Didn't
They're
help.
just going to
Yeah,
come back.
they came
Yeah,
back.
if you burn and then treat the next year with that rodeo, I think you'll have a better chance of getting rid of them. Or cutting back the population.
I heard if you cut them below water level that they would drown out. I don't know if that's really true or not, but
I've always seen them come back.
yeah.
Mine are back in green and beautiful.
Yeah. Probably after you burned them, they look a whole lot prettier. Yeah.
If you have a pond and you use anything that's aquatic and stuff, can you still use the water for irrigation or for animals or whatever? If you use something to spray in the pond to get rid of like grass and stuff that grows all in it?
You're going to have to read the label and look into that. That's a touchy subject.
Look at your grazing restrictions and things like that, but if you want to use anything within your waterways, you
I
can
don't,
use that aquatic.
I don't think that they would allow you to use that water for irrigation systems if it was treated. So, I don't know. You're gonna have to think about
The
it.
new thing, that algae that's growing, have you guys heard about that? Killing the dogs?
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's like, you.
The red algae or what?
I think it's a green algae.
Huh.
And that it's toxic to dogs and stuff. And I was wondering if it's.
So they
toxic
drink the
to-
water and they die?
Yeah, like within hours. Oh, wow. I just saw it on Facebook.
Look into that.
I don't know if it's in northern Colorado or where, but it's, I wonder if it's,
Probably they have all.
must have not gotten to us yet, so hopefully it doesn't.
Anything else?
Come up and look at the weeds and you
Yeah.
have some other questions too. so.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right, thank you.
That's